You devoured one of your own? Ryuk asked, looking at Elder Sedano, whose staff was now radiating with more power than ever. If I had known you had become so much of a monster, this would have been the first thing I would have done, Elder Sedano said. The dark power from the staff continued crawling across his skin as veins popped all over, thick and black in color. But now it's not too late either. Space was ripped apart as Ryuk flashed forward toward Elder Sedano, whose robes were turned to ashes from the incredible energy bursting out of his veins. With his robes gone, his true form was revealed. A devilish dwarf covered in thick dark veins. Out of his forehead, 2 long horns extended, and Elder Sedano raised his staff and slammed it onto the ground. Crackle! The sound of lightning rang out, and Ryuk, just a meter away with all 8 arms turned into blades, cleaving toward the Elder, was suddenly blasted downward through the void as a pillar of lightning slammed into him. He forced himself to a stop 700 kilometers down the void. His teeth ground together from the pain. It was familiar, horrifyingly familiar. When he turned his head, horror crossed his eyes. Elder Sedano was nowhere to be seen. He had been bombarded by a pillar of dark lightning, the same dark lightning that had struck Ryuk after he brought Iravel back from death. Punisher lightning? He mused out in caution. Elder Sedano was being punished for breaking the rules of reality. But what had he done to deserve being erased? The answer lay in the staff, which he now held downward, pointed at Ryuk. Evilio Sedano. The moment those words were uttered, the void trembled. Endless darkness stretched in every direction from beneath the staff. Yet above it all, Elder Sedano floated like a scar across creation. Punisher lightning, the wrath of the heavens, reached a monumental descent level, tearing away his skin, cracking his bones, and burning off his flesh. Yet the Elder still refused to fall. Instead, he raised his head, looking into the endless void as the skin on his face was burned off, leaving only his skull. Today, I fall. It occurred to Elder Sedano, who remained silent for a while before he gripped his staff tighter. Turning to Ryuk in the dark void, he called out, "Fall of the Morning Star." The staff pulsed once, and a light erupted through the void. A massive sigil of 6 wings spun open behind Elder Sedano, stretching for thousands of kilometers, the void shaking as if the heavens were pressing down upon it. Every bolt of lightning that struck the wings was absorbed by the dark sigils etched upon their surface, further deepening and twisting them into a burning halo of divine destruction. Below, Ryuk looked up from the void. Even though he stood 700 kilometers away, the air around him had grown heavy, so heavy that even the faintest of movement felt like an impossible task. He felt his own chest sink within him, pressing against his heart and making breathing incredibly difficult. A beam of light had formed above Sedano, wide enough to swallow a world, its edge burning with dark flames that tore through reality. But Ryuk saw deeper. Sedano was turning to ashes, along with his staff, and just before he was erased, he cackled out his last words. "I'll be waiting for you in hell, son of carnage." The second he was fully turned to ashes, his soul destroyed by Punisher lightning, the fall of the Morning Star fell, splitting the void into 2. There was no sound, only blinding radiance that tore through the dark, holding primordial law that expanded downward in waves, erasing space, energy, and even time itself. The impact had yet to reach Ryuk, yet he could already feel it, his own death, looming over him. In the next moment, all 6 of his extra arms faded away, leaving only the original 2, the same for the crystals that burned around his head like a crown, and the wings behind him. He had reverted to his normal humanoid form, facing the attack in his base state. But his chance of survival like this was null. From the moment Elder Sedano had vanished, he knew what was coming. The beam wasn't meant to kill, it was meant to erase. The art Elder Sedano had used was a forbidden divine art that invoked the wrath of heaven against both the caster and the target. Even Elder Sedano himself had been judged as prideful enough to challenge the divine, ensuring his erasure. This was judgment itself, and with every second, the sky of light fell faster, each pulse brighter than the last. The sound of a slow exhale left Ryuk's lips, and in the next moment, something altered. The shadow cast beneath him began to move on its own. It appeared, standing before Ryuk, and then it raised both palms into the air, pressing them together in the form of a prayer. From Ryuk's lips, words like a curse were released. Abyssal law, nullification of the divine. A deep vibration echoed from Ryuk's chest, and from the raised hands of his shadow, black mist poured out, swirling into a massive storm of darkness that bent everything around him. Space twisted inward, light, sound, and gravity collapsing into a single point before him. A singularity opened high above, meeting the beam of judgment head-on. For a moment, the light resisted, roaring like a god denied its prey. But the abyss only pulled harder, dragging that endless radiance into its center. Two heavenly forces, one devoured by the other. How could a mere force as the void hold them? In the next moment it screamed, a scream no mortal soul was ever meant to hear, and in that instant, the void, unable to withstand the divine energy, exploded right before Ryuk. Kaboom! The devastating impact tore across reality, swallowing Ryuk. His arms cracked, flesh melting from divine heat, but it did not destroy him as his body quickly began to change. His skin hardened, turning jade with lines of gold and black running across it, forming scales that reflected the falling lights. His broken bones snapped back, thickening as his frame grew heavier. In the next moment, Ryuk's face lengthened along with his hulking frame, and then a line tore open directly across his face, revealing a gaping maw. Host has activated a supreme hybrid skill, Draconic Devourer. Opening that maw, a terrifying absorption force descended upon the energies around him as he forcefully sucked them into himself. The void could not hold the energy. Ryuk had seen through that and he planned for it. Devouring the fall of the morning star when it fell upon him was suicide. The momentum and will of the strike would have killed him. So he planned for it to be devoured by his own abyssal singularity. The void itself had suffered from holding onto that singularity and had been destroyed. But that also meant it had taken away some of the singularity's destructiveness. The rest Ryuk had planned to devour. And in one single gulp, all of the remaining energies were sucked into him whole. His body expanded further and further, widening like a balloon. It's still too much to contain. The panel flashed in bold. Bang! A powerful explosion erupted as Ryuk burst apart, the energy within him detonating outward. But it had barely been a second before the droplets of blood, splashing around from the explosion, quickly began gathering together, forming a new maw. And once again that maw began to devour. From a simple mouth it grew, coagulating and coalescing the divine energies, and soon enough, a full being was standing in the void. It was Ryuk, but this time he was different. He had no skin, no flesh. Instead, his body seemed to have been made from the coalescing of energies, mostly dots of black and blue. It was as if he had been created from the remains of a collapsing galaxy. He looked at his new form, his hands, the star-like dots upon them, and he exhaled deeply. Congratulations! Host has unlocked a new form from the devouring of two heavenly energies. Form name, Abyss Wrath. I grew stronger, he mused to himself. But then, he felt a stir from behind him in the far void. Turning, he found a colossal body of darkness hanging behind him. Null! Ryuk called out, looking at the being, especially its arm. They were enormous claws made of pitch darkness, and in their grasp was Ryuk. While the humanoid Ryuk had been fighting the 7 ancient devil elders, the draconic Ryuk had been fighting against Null. And right now, Null's claws were tearing out from the dragon's back as it dangled lifelessly in his grasp. Null raised his claws, flinging the draconic corpse toward Ryuk. His enormous draconic body slammed forward toward him, but at the last moment, a rift appeared. A rift not of darkness, but of pure white, and the humongous dragon disappeared into it. Ryuk had kept that body in his Technoforge ruin. It might be dead, but that was only a part of his soul that had been destroyed. Unlike the current body he had now, which was a coalescence of energy, the draconic form held all of his other body parts, hence giving it importance.
Ne ipsi uidem satano te delere potuit.
Even Sedano could not have you destroyed? Null said, looking at Ryuk with creased brows. Elder Sedano. That elder was a being even Null himself was wary of fighting, as the dwarf was as deep as an abyss. Yet who would have thought he would meet his death fighting Ryuk? And as Null looked at the Ryuk before him, his heart subconsciously raced. He has grown even stronger. Just what did Sedano do? He wondered. The ancient elders, pillars of the Nullic domain, have all been destroyed by me, Ryuk called out to Null. The 7 calamities have suffered the same fate, save for the first calamity, who I know is being hidden by you. He might as well be marked deceased for as long as I continue to exist, Ryuk said, his voice echoing coldly through the dark. Null's pitch-black eyes flickered with crimson. Have you not realized, Null? Ryuk asked, that you have already lost this fight?
Coram te sto et d'ici me perdidis.
I stand before you, and you say I have lost? Null asked with a scoff, and Ryuk calmly replied, What use does my death bring? It made Null pause in his steps. Whether you manage to destroy me or I manage to destroy you, does that even matter? The Nulls have lost their pillars of power. They will be hunted down across the universe no matter what happens now. He spoke a truth that made a gleam of suppressed horror flash across Null's eyes. The calamities had been destroyed. They were the ones responsible for invading worlds and turning them into dark Gomers, something that served as a cultivation ground for the Nulls. But now that they had almost all been destroyed, the growth of the Nulls had automatically been halted. The elders who held the function of maintaining power had also been destroyed. Even if Null managed to destroy him, Ryuk himself was inconsequential, and his death would not make any substantial ripple at all. But one thing was certain. The Null race had now completely fallen from the hierarchy of truly powerful evil races in this universe. And worse, they had countless foes. The current 2 most evil races on the Conqueror hierarchy were already eyeing them, waiting to strike and crush them after they had lost 4 of their calamities. But now that the calamities and even the fearsome ancient devil elders had all been destroyed, what would stop them from chasing the last Null to the depths of hell and killing him off? Not to mention the millions of races that held raging vengeance for the countless worlds the Nulls had destroyed. All of it led to a single realization. The Nulls have fallen. One question was left in Null's mind as he thought about things. How? How had this even happened? How had a situation they thought to be so inconsequential become something as huge as them potentially facing extinction soon? Not even Thaithvorgeth, the feared Null of Carnage, had driven their race to such a state upon falling out with them. Yet, how had this brat done it with no one at all to aid him? He wanted to rage. He wanted to destroy him. But it was just like Ryuk had said. So what if he was destroyed or died? His race was doomed anyway. Ubi. Where? Null asked. Where did you throw the Null domain to? A random void. They could be anywhere. He replied, and in the next moment, boom! Space before him shattered apart as Null's wide claws slashed the space into nothing, leaving a scar on reality itself. He remained in his position, turning his head to find Ryuk silently floating in the void with both arms crossed.
Mi tantum te de l'air ne cessait.
I just need to destroy you.
Quando te de lebo propte million cnulorum co occidisti, cnulo recuprabo et abscondam.
When I destroy you for the millions of Nulls you killed, I will gather back the Nulls and hide them away.
Licet centena, etiam milia anorum somni capia, nus cnuli iterum renascemur.
Let it take hundreds or even thousands of years of slumber, but we Nulls will grow back. And when we reappear in this universe, we will be stronger than ever.
Modo te morio porte.
You just need to die, he roared, stretching his palm toward Ryuk. Space was sliced apart as a pillar of condensed, destructive abyssal energy burst forward toward Ryuk with insane speed. To the attack, Ryuk reached out his right hand as well. The energy that made his body concentrated around his arm, the dark motes specifically, and in the next moment, the sound of lightning crackling resounded through the void as lightning coalesced over his palm. Fall. Boom. Reality in his path was destroyed into nothing as the pitch-black lightning crackled furiously toward the approaching pillar of abyssal energy. When they collided, the lightning pillar completely tore through the abyssal energy, devouring it as its power skyrocketed to extreme levels.
Quide.
Fulmen Punitoris? What is Punisher lightning? Null roared in shock, the lightning slowly disappearing, only for a vortex to appear right before his face and it shut out. Boom! It slammed into him with immense power, a massive detonation that sent Null's head curving backward as lightning constantly crackled across his face amidst the destroyed remains of the void. He remained in that position for a while before raising his head. The dark skin of his face had been peeled off, and what was beneath wasn't a humanoid skull but an object. It was shaped like one, but it wasn't bone. It was crimson in color, with thousands of ever-twisting layers of crimson runes etched upon its surface. The sight of those runes sent Ryuk's heart into a frenzy. That's it. Ah! A deep exhale of dark smoke left Null's lips as he stared emptily at the void beneath his feet before his face suddenly jerked up, eyes turning fully crimson.
Per.
Be Destro. He stopped mid-command, frozen as he found Ryuk standing just a few inches from his face. Ryuk's palm reached out and landed upon the interlocking runes present on Null's forehead. I am well aware of your power of dark command, Null. I won't let that repeat. Immediately, Null swung his massive claws, brimming with abyssal energy. It appeared by Ryuk's side faster than an instant, but Ryuk moved faster. With one hand resting over Null's skull, the other formed a seal as he called out, Forbidden Abyss Rathart. Abyss overwrite. A ripple speared out from his hand resting upon Null's head. The interlocking runes upon Null's face forcefully halted before they all reversed. But at the same time, the claw reached Ryuk. When it slammed into him, his entire body shifted to the side, blasted so far that reality cracked, and he disappeared through the crack, completely fading out of existence. Quid? What? Quid Fesicide? What have you done? Null's roar of horror echoed throughout the void as his massive claws gripped his head. The darkness that covered his skin faded away, revealing his bony inner layer, and upon it were millions upon millions of runes. What was worse was that those runes were spinning. They were revolving, and each revolution was absolutely beyond Null's control. They were reversing. His hands gripped his head. The feeling of strength that ought to be increasing from the endless abyssal energy in the world tethered upon the runes started to reverse upon him. Immediately, his massive claws gripped tighter as he fell into a silent slumber. It became a war to force his own runes back to their normal revolution. Intense abyssal energy burst out from Null's hulking frame, filling the void and twisting reality itself. His teeth ground together, and after what seemed like an eternity, the runes upon his body slowed their reversal before completely halting. Then he changed his seal, and in the next moment the rune's revolution returned to normal. The second that was done, Null's eyes softened, his massive hands falling to his knees as he breathed out chaotically. He looked into the chaotic rift where Ryuk had been sent, and his tired expression turned into an evil grin. His claw attack wasn't a simple strike. Null was the manifestation of darkness, and he used that darkness to bypass this reality and tear it open, leading to another reality beyond this one. The reality that the gods came. But while gods were allowed to descend upon this reality, the rule of the universe stated that no being born within it could ascend to the reality where the gods came from. They would face absolute erasure halfway, and right now Ryuk was as good as dead.
Infine, est tantum spurius pur.
In the end, you're just a bastard brat, he called with a disgusted huff, turning his back on the rift. But he had yet to take even a few steps when, splatter, the sound of liquid splashing rang out. Null paused, raising his hand. His eyes furrowed as he noticed blood on them.
Quide?
What is? In the next moment, it became a full downpour of thick red blood. The sight of a rain of blood made Null's eyes slowly widen from the realization, and in the next moment, his body suddenly began to shake in uncontrollable fear as his trembling head turned upward toward the sky. There, riding upon a wave of blood that descended from the heavens, was a being that was never meant to be.
Tête Vorgat.
Why, Ryuk? Why did you do that? The system blinked before Ryuk's eyes as he floated within this realm. A realm where everything seemed to move around him at unimaginable speed. He watched a large celestial body explode, birthing galaxies with countless solar systems and planets. He watched those planets revolve and revolve before they were extinguished one by one. The stars faded off, the planets turned to debris, all of it happening within seconds, and the motion continued endlessly. The only one beyond all this was Ryuk, seemingly at the center of this realm. But his state was debilitating. A slash had been carved through him from his right shoulder down to his left thigh, and the wound brimmed with abyssal energy that seemed to devour the remnant energy that remained in his body. He had been sliced into 3 parts, and if he had only been flesh, he would have long been dead. You could have dodged the attack. You could have done something more than that. Why did you use that art? What was the purpose? The system blinked continuously, and Ryuk was well aware. In that moment when Null had attacked, he could have dodged. He could have fought. Yet he chose to use that forbidden art, leaving himself fully exposed to Null's blow. Why? Ryuk muttered, his voice drowned by the sounds of destruction and rebirth echoing all around him. It felt like the only way. It was like those moments when he used a technique he had never tried before, yet somehow knew it was meant for that situation. When he had seen the runes forming Null's existence, his body had moved instinctively, reaching toward him and activating that technique. He had no idea what he had done, but his body did. At that instant, something had told him that the only way to win against Null was to use that art. He had believed it would destroy Null, yet Null's attack still reached him, sending him into this realm where he could feel his existence fading away with every breath. There was nothing he could do. His soul had grown weary, too weary from the endless battles and suppressed pain. He had already lost a part of his soul, his draconic form, killed by Null. His soul was incomplete to begin with, and now half of what remained was gone. It had lost its power, leaving him more devastated than ever. His eyelids grew heavier by the second. He wanted to sleep. Don't. Please don't. The system panel flashed again, but even that was blurry. It all felt so distant. I want to sleep. How? The realization of the horror before him froze Null in his tracks. Gaze raised, he watched blood rain down on his figure, thick enough to stain his pitch-black form crimson, as he looked at the being descending upon him. It was a devil of crimson, not taller than 7 meters. Its body hung low, arms dangling around its knees, while the blood beneath its feet magically kept it upright. How did he escape imprisonment? Null muttered in disbelief. Then it struck him. The image flickered in his memory, Ryuk touching his head and forcing a reversal of the runes. My manifestation runes. He reversed them and allowed Thaith Vorgoth to break free. The runes carved upon Null's being were not ordinary. They were existence runes, hidden behind the darkness that masked his form. Punisher Lightning was a power that could erase any soul within reality, and Ryuk had harnessed that lightning through his Abyss Wrath form. When Punisher Lightning struck Null's face, not even his darkness could resist the heavenly wrath. It had peeled away, revealing the existence runes beneath. Those runes were what made him Null like his own soul, but they also had one more function. A lock. They sealed away many things. And when Null had faced Thaith Vorgoth in the last Null Dragon War, he had released all that he had previously sealed to have enough space to imprison Thaith Vorgoth. As long as those runes continued to spin, Thaith Vorgoth would remain sealed in eternal slumber. But Ryuk's action, touching him and invoking that forbidden art, had reversed the runic laws, allowing Faith Vorgoth to break free, and now the Null of Carnage was before him. Though crouched upon the ground slowly, the devil's neck slowly rose, the sound of bones cracking filling the void louder than even the descent of Punisher lightning. His face raised, and then it opened its eyes. They were crimson red, the purest of crimson, with a serpentine slit of deepest black at its center. They burned with flames of pitch black and crimson red, and in the next moment, the void suddenly turned scarlet, melting into rivers of blood. This rage. It dawned on Null, who watched those eyes roll, then focused on him. Null! The word echoed through the void, deeper than the darkest growl Null had ever heard. And in that instant, Null made his choice. Turning, he took a step forward, and a beam of darkness quickly pierced through the void, leaving a scar across reality itself. He had chosen to run. Crack, crack. The sound of bones breaking followed as Faith Vorgoth rose fully from his crouch, his claws extending to the sides. The blood sea beneath him surged like a storm, and from it rose an object, a crimson scythe, 1,000 meters long, its edge curved like the perfect crescent of a moon. Faith Vorgoth raised his head, eyes locking on the fleeing light millions of kilometers away. The sea of blood beneath him tilted backward, reality bending and cracking for thousands of kilometers around and forward, even though he had yet to take a step. Yet, just as his body leaned forward slightly, it suddenly paused. The world froze with him, his crimson eyes snapping sideways, blazing with wrath. All he saw was the shattered reality merged with another. Faith Vorgoth's massive claws unconsciously reached for his heart, and a growl echoed through the void. Ryuk! The smell of blood. That was the first thing that came to his senses, and then came the sound of the breeze flapping around him. In the next moment, his eyes were forced open, and he saw the sky. A blue sky with lingering green aurora. Though the blue was clear, the world itself had a slightly dark setting, making it look like dusk. It wasn't haunting. If anything, it made the green light flicker beautifully through the sky. He felt a soft touch upon him, and he turned slightly, looking at the short green grasses where he seemed to have been buried. Ryuk sat up, his hands clasping his forehead slightly, due to the throbbing pain arising from his memories flooding back. But then, he paused when the last scene reached him. He could remember vividly the cleave through his body, as he disappeared beyond existence. He had fallen asleep after, yet here he was in the grass. Unconsciously, he turned to look at where there ought to be cleaved, but he was surprised to see a crimson, stone-like crystal filling up the space. His hand reached and lightly ran his fingers around it. It was hard, and placing the smell by his nose, he was reminded of what had awoken him in the first place. Blood. Ryuk shot to his feet right after. He looked behind him. There was nothing but an endless span of grass as far as his eyes could see. But before him, he seemed to be standing on a high rise. He stepped forward to the edge, and looking down, his breath caught within his throat. This would normally be one of those places where there was a high ground, while beneath would be an endless sea of water. But what was beneath Ryuk wasn't an endless sea of water. Instead, an endless sea of blood. Crimson-red blood that splashed around like the sea. And what really made him back off unconsciously was when he saw a body drowned beneath that wave, with only his face out to sea. It was Null himself. But right now, there were thick chains of crimson that surrounded every inch of his body, tightening up like some prey, while their ends went deeper down the blood sea than Ryuk's sight could reach. His eyes were open, but he didn't struggle at all against the chains, simply remaining silent, while staring blankly at the sky. But then he seemed to sense Ryuk, and his pitch-black eyes turned to him. The eyes were wrong. Looking at Null, he saw that his eyes were split in two, a horizontal line cutting through both of them and running across his face. Could have only been done by something horrifyingly sharp. Null had been captured? But who captured him? The sound of heavy splashing rang out in that moment, and Ryuk turned to the side, finding the wave of blood going higher and higher into the air. His heart unconsciously beat harder. Not out of fear, but from something he couldn't understand. A wave of familiarity hit him as he looked up at that sea wave, and when it grew up to his eye level, he watched a being appear, riding atop the blood wave. A devilish figure of black roughly around Ryuk's own height, about 7 meters. He had 2 long horns, devilishly large claws, and his eyes were pure crimson with a serpentine black center. Crimson hair flared around him, and just standing there, the nauseous smell of blood filled every single space around Ryuk. Looking at him placed an unpalpable level of pressure, as if one were standing before the incarnation of death. His presence made Ryuk want to activate his ultimate skill and prepare for a battle that would most likely be one of his hardest. Yet he remained there silently, and in the next moment, his hands unconsciously reached for his heart. It was beating, as loud as ever, but the rhythm was completely different. The feeling that passed through him was something he could never put into words. But he knew, and unconsciously he called out, "Faith Vorgith." The call brought changes to the devilish being above him. The dark, serpentine line in his eyes transformed from a vertical slit to a complete circle. Now, it made more sense how Null had been captured and tied up in chains. But how? Scoff. A loud scoff echoed through the realm, and it came from Null. How? You were the one who released him from imprisonment with that art of yours. You bast. Null cursed, but he never completed the word when he froze. His crimson eyes raised to the sky and he found Faith Vorgith staring at him silently, his serpentine eyes narrowing. Humph! He scoffed, ignoring them both. So that art released Faith Vorgith? How unexpected. The system panel flashed as Ryuk's brow furrowed. He had been expecting that art to do something different, maybe erase Null, but who would have guessed it brought Faith Vorgith back instead? How had that even happened? He turned back to Faith Vorgith, a vein of anger silently popping on his forehead. If I knew that art would have let you escape imprisonment, I never would have activated it. It was his first word to him, and he watched as Faith Vorgith's plain expression dispersed into a grin. You really can talk now. Interesting, he said as Ryuk's brow quivered before he ignored him, turning away. He jumped up, trying to hover to Null, but he plummeted down to the ground in the next instant, slamming onto his butt. I can't fly? Ryuk mused in disbelief, pushing himself off his butt and coming closer to the mountain. But then, a handful of blood suddenly rose, forming a hovering platform that came to stand just before him. Need a hand? Faith Vorgith called out, but all Ryuk did was roughly slap forward, blowing the platform into liquid that rained back into the blood sea. I don't need your devil-forsaken help, he roared in anger before turning to Null. Hey Null, listen up, Ryuk screamed from afar as Null raised an eyebrow. His maw moved, but they paused as he raised his gaze, seeing Faith Vorgith looking down at him. Null's brow quivered for a moment before he turned back to Ryuk, shouting, Say what? You're too far off. I can't hear you? Maybe use the blood platform? Just a suggestion. Null shouted back as Ryuk watched a second blood platform manifest before him. It only took a second for him to understand what was going on. You bastards! He was the one influencing Null, trying to have him use his help. But that was something Ryuk would never do. I know you can hear me, Null. I want to know everything about the Null Dragon War, he shouted, as Faith Vorgith paused his grin, his brows furrowing as he turned to Null. Null Dragon? He asked, and Null cackled evilly. Null Dragon War is a ridiculous name. Where'd you even get that from? Null asked with a loud harumph, turning to Ryuk, who furrowed his eyebrows. Null Dragon was a name he had coined by himself. Stop messing around, Nulls. The Nulls fought the dragons, and they all suddenly disappeared. What happened to them? Humph. Why should I even bother telling you? Go to hell. Null roared back, but his eyes widened in the next moment, bulging as the chains of red blood tightened over him, squeezing tightly. In the next moment, he was forcefully raised upright from the blood sea, his eyes coming to stand before Faith Vorgith. Tell me what happened after your little trick. Null, he called out to him. My little trick kept you in imprisonment for a century, so maybe it isn't that little. Null humphed. But then Faith Vorgeth's hands reached to the side as the sea began to tumble and coil. A thick killing intent surged through the world as Ryuk watched the entire realm suddenly turn crimson. Space broke apart, and blood came pouring down, and even the sky itself began raining blood. Fine. Fine. If you want sad news, I'll give it to you. Null said as Faith Vorgeth returned his hand, everything fading off as if it was all only an illusion. After you were locked up, Null said, turning to Faith Vorgeth. The daughter of Velzaraka gathered the Draconic army to fight upon hearing the news of your imprisonment. She did, Null said, as Faith Vorgeth's serpentine eyes turned circular once more. It occurred to Ryuk that not even Faith Vorgeth was aware of the Dragonul War, but that made sense. Faith Vorgeth had already been imprisoned before that time and had no idea what happened afterward. What happened to the dragons? Ryuk asked from below as Null rolled his head. Isn't that obvious? He paused, a groan finally leaving his lips as the chains tightened upon his hulking frame. He turned his eyes, finding Faith Vorgeth's serpentine gaze looking at him. Where is she, Null? Hey, Faith Vorgeth, Null called out with a smirk on his lips, even as dark blood ran down from the thick chains binding him. Do you remember Halowirita? The question made Faith Vorgeth pause. Halowirita, Ryuk mused. He had no recollection of that name whatsoever. Let me give you a quick rundown of your father, Ryuk, Faith Vorgeth said, turning to Ryuk, but the chains tightened around him again. Really, Faith Vorgeth? You want to start keeping secrets from him, too? Secrets were the reason why we both fell out, remember? Your relationship with your son is already as bad as it can be. You sure you want to add more to it? Null said, flashing a vile grin at Faith Vorgeth, who paused, his narrowed eyes turning to look at Ryuk, who was currently staring at him in confusion and caution. A silent growl left Faith Vorgeth's lips as the chains binding Null slightly released. Kakik. I thought so. See, Ryuk, Faith Vorgeth was a celebrity back in his heyday. Null began, but he was cut off. I don't care if he was a celebrity. Where are the dragons? Tisk, kids, and impatience. You want to hear the Null Dragon War story or not? He shot back in anger, and Ryuk paused for a while before keeping quiet. Kakik. I thought so, Null replied triumphantly. As I was saying, Faith Vorgeth was quite a celebrity in his past, unlike your nameless self, with so much power yet zero recognition. He poked as Ryuk's eyes dimmed. Faith Vorgeth was excellent in both power and fame. To everyone else but us Nulls, his name was terror. Faith Vorgeth coming to a world meant the doom of that world, and he sent even the mightiest warriors running away from that world. But while his name was terror upon this world of ours, to the three supreme races who view us all as ants, Faith Vorgeth was an interesting ant. And like anyone with fame, he had a few admirers from among the beauties of the supreme races. I bet your nameless self doesn't have one, though, he added, giving a side-eye to Ryuk, who had finally had enough. Are you telling a story or poking at me? Kakik. Jealous. Of all the ladies of the supreme race that are in love with Faith Vorgeth, there's one who is the most crazy about him. Her name is Halowirita, and she's not just any admirer. She is the only and spoiled princess of the mighty Hallowworms, Null declared grandly, as Ryuk's eyebrows creased in confusion before they widened in disbelief. There were 3 supreme races, and one of them was the Hallowworms. The princess of the Hallowworm race? Crazy, isn't it? Faith Vorgeth said, noticing his shock. And how's that got to do with where the dragons are, though? He asked, quelling down his shock. One thing about Faith Vorgeth is, he doesn't really have that much in terms of emotions, especially the emotion of love. He's lacking that one specifically. Many women had tried to propose to him, but he didn't even look their way. That had created some sort of competition amongst his admirers. Just who could tame the untamable Null of Carnage, make him grovel beneath their feet, eyes colored in pure obsession. Tisk, TSK, females and their foolish fantasies. Null cursed. Halawirata, being the spoiled princess that she is, thought to herself that she would be the one to tame the so-called Null of Carnage. But, just like any other girl, Thaithvorgeth didn't look her way. She wasn't actually that annoyed by it at first. The type to be fine with things so far, nobody changed it. But then, she heard the news. News of Thaithvorgeth having fallen for the daughter of Velzaraka and even having a child with her. That set Halawirata aflame. So she got jealous, wow? I'm impressed, Ryuk said boredly, but Null continued. She wasn't just jealous. You might not know, but the Hallowyrms and the dragons are very similar. The dragons are like lesser versions of them, and Halawirata could not imagine that a lower race than her would be able to conquer the one she could not manage to do. What should have been simple jealousy led to unbridled rage. And that rage of hers not only started the Null Dragon War, but also turned your life upside down. Ryuk, your words. This doesn't make any sense, Ryuk mused out loud. I was told that you, Null, started the Null Dragon War due to your fallout with Thaithvorgeth. Indeed, Thaithvorgeth added, turning suspicion to Null. His love with the daughter of Velzaraka was something the majority of the Nulls could not accept, Null most especially, and that was why they had all betrayed him. But now, Null himself was blaming it all on Halawirata? That made no sense at all. Oh, give it a thought, Thaithvorgeth. Null called out to him. You mentioned that little trick of mine that I employed to imprison you, right? He asked. Thaithvorgeth silently growled. That object is Uoridum, a realm that acts similarly to a domain expansion, preventing a single target from being able to use any energy or law. With that realm unleashed and targeting you, you became too weak and hence defeated. Null explained, and now it dawned on Ryuk. It had been said, Null along with the ancient devil elders had defeated Thaithvorgeth and imprisoned him. Yet, Thaithvorgeth had captured Null and tied him up right now. How was it that they had defeated such a being in the past? But now it made more sense. But think now, that object that unfolded the realm Uramuda, where do you think I got it from? Null asked as Thaithvorgeth paused. An object that creates a realm that can hold your carnage law back. That's an object on the level of a god tool, and you of all people should know we Nulls have no such object in our ancestral grounds. Someone gave it to you? Thaithvorgeth mused. Yes. It was given to me by the Hallowyrms on the order of Halawirata to restrain you. That was her punishment for you choosing the daughter of Velzaraka over her. I was already grumbling that you no longer listened to me, and at any moment you can turn your scythe against us, and she brought up the decision of sealing you up forever. It was a win-win situation for us both, so I took the deal. Null said as the cursed chains around him tightened harder. But that still doesn't make sense, Ryuk called out as the chain paused. In my memories, I saw an image, the image of the daughter of Velzaraka being told that the Nulls have breached one of the walls. There was even a memory showing a battle where you Nulls asked the dragons to give me up, and they fought back instead. You Nulls stormed into the dragon grounds. There's no doubt about that. Ryuk shot back, and Null cackled loudly. Seems like the plot was just that good, even managing to fool one who has the memories, Null said with a vile grin as Ryuk paused. Think about it, Ryuk. The three supreme races are powerful, and they have taken it as their aim to maintain order in this universe. It's not because they're noble or anything, don't be naive here. It's because while each of us all might be nothing but ants to them, when ants revolt with their sheer numbers, even the most mighty pride of lions can be taken down. If the news of one of the supreme races, those who were supposed to be our guardians, got out that they had slaughtered an entire prominent race, one as popular and noble as the dragons, what do you think would explode through the universe? He asked as Ryuk paused. It will turn chaotic. Chaos. With a high chance of other races revolting. If such happened, the other two supreme races would be forced to challenge the Hallowyrms, leading to endless conflict. So what was the best way to avoid chaos while still dealing with the dragons? Have the story spread that the Nulls, a race equal in hierarchy with the dragons, had fought together and that the Nulls won. It would look like an ordinary battle that happens every day, and the winner gets to rewrite reality, right? The world witnessed the Nulls marching into the dragon grounds, and they also witnessed us marching out, with every dragon having disappeared, most likely killed off. But did we really fight the dragons? Null asked, grinning evilly. The answer is, no, he said, as Ryuk's heart loudly pounded. The Hallowworms captured the dragons after the news of their battle with us Nulls spread. How else do you think no dragon who ever went to that war survived at all? Nor were their graveyards ever discovered. Because with a simple swipe of a being's hand, all of them disappeared, stored away in some godforsaken realm in the shape of a tiny ball. Before the war even started at all, the daughter of Velzaraka already gave you out to Bob and asked her 12 guardians to protect you. The only war that happened was us trying to get you back, and the only dragons that we Nulls killed were those 12. And actually only 5 of them died. 7 of them still escaped. Null called out, and Ryuk's knees collapsed, landing on the ground. The dragons were never destroyed. The Nulls and the dragons never fought at all. They had all been taken by the Hallowworms. So if you want to know where your wife is, go meet the Hallowworms. They've got your answer, not me. Null said to Faith Vorgith, but his eyes weren't on him. He turned, and there he saw Ryuk kneeling. You know, I don't even blame you anymore, Ryuk, because now that I think about it, your only crime in all of this was being born, resulting in getting caught in the fight of your dad's bitter girlfriend. I don't really have a problem with your birth at all, and my dividing you into pieces was just fear of your revenge. You divided him into pieces? Null said, as a groan left Null's lips from how tight the chain tightened, sucking off his existence runes. Oh, I did, Null. I divided him into 7 pieces, and gave him to 7 of your army generals, turning them to calamities. But can you guess who suggested the idea of me dividing your son into pieces? Faith Vorgith? Hallow-Wirita. Of course. She was jealous of you having a son with another person, so she instructed me to kill him off. But I think killing such a talent off was stupid, so I opted for division to further strengthen us, Nulls. And can you guess who gave me the manual to be able to conjoin Ryuk's severed parts with your generals? Null asked, watching as the Vorgitha's devilish claw folded. Hallow-Wirita. But can you believe it, Faith Vorgith? That against such overwhelming odds, Ryuk fought it all back, starting with nothing but a heart, lung, and incomplete brain from a lower world? He said, the anger in his eyes pausing. He has destroyed 6 of the 7 calamities, gaining back everything taken away from him and even killing all of the ancient elders that took you down, he said. Faith Vorgith was left in shock. Do not mistake my words for me trying to make you feel proud. I said it so you can have an inkling of his pain right now. Pain. All he had to go through, from only a heart and lungs to this level, from the lowest of the lower realms to here. All just to find out everything he had been fighting for was a lie, and all of his misfortune came from your simple failure to keep the jealousy of your lovers in check. Can you imagine that pain, Faith Vorgith? That type of pain that turns even the strongest of hearts into the walking dead. Quite hurtful, isn't it? It's a lie. Tell me it's all a lie, Ryuk muttered, his hands tightening so hard within his palms that blood rained upon the green grass. How long have I been fighting for? How much pain have I had to bear? And this is the reason? This is why I fight? A bad love triangle? At first he had strived wanting back his parts. But another point, he remembered he had lost the will for regain his true body parts. That was after his fallout with Nullik and Draconic back then. He already had the nanobody, and at that moment he had felt it was enough. Yet, when he remembered the dragon who had fought for him, when he thought of the fact that the entire dragon race had fought just to keep a boy alive, and faced such selfless destruction, he had told himself that he could not let the Nulls have their way. When he learned the righteous had been the ones to fall, he had said no, and he had fought. That was the thing that had carried him all the way here. He had decided he would take revenge for them all. Yet, that was a lie? The dragon never fought for him. All they did was follow behind the back of a woman burning with rage from her lover being captured. Only 5 dragons had truly died for him. The Nulls, the race who he had planned to one day wipe out of the universe to revenge the dragons they killed, never raised their claws upon them at all. And all of this pain, his deprivation of familial love and childhood, all of it was due to a single woman's bitter feelings? And if it had been any woman, he would have raged. He would have made her his next aim, to destroy her for taking everything from him. But that woman was his father's old lover? How could this be the end? What had he been fighting for at all? What was he even supposed to fight for now? What was there to even fight for at all? A silent ringing was all he heard in his head, going for longer than he could bother to keep count. In the end, how pathetic! He mused, a line of red blood trailing Dwan from his right eye. Rising up, he turned to Null and asked, "Where is my soul?" Null did not gatekeep it any longer. From the slit in his eyes, an object flew out. A pyramid, the size of a football, covered with thousands of runes. I already killed the first calamity and removed the soul from him, keeping it to myself just to be safe. But now, Null said as the pyramid floated forward to Ryuk, I don't think you deserve any more of this madness. Take your last true body part and go live your own life, Ryuk. Live it well, he said, and Ryuk took the pyramid in his hands. In the next moment, it disappeared, stored away, and without another word, he turned his back and silently walked off into the distance. Why? Don't. Faith Vorgeth tried to speak, but he was stopped by Null, who continued, all his life he has searched for the truth, and to come this far, he must have thought it noble. But our past is farthest from noble and closest to wretched. He's disappointed, he regrets, but that is a must every being must face eventually. Now, let him go. Let him go, to fade away from your shadow and find his own life. If he succeeds, he will find a life worthy of living. And if he fails? Faith Vorgeth asked, turning to Null. He become a failure, like us. Faith Vorgeth said, only to be gazed down at. Don't put us both in the same word, Null. Even at this point, you still try to deny it? Deny what? You're a failure of a father, Null. A failure of a lover. A failure of a hero. A failure of a friend. And I am a failure of a bloodline manifestation. I had formed from the success of the Nulls, and my divine purpose is to keep that success. Yet now, the Null will face extinction soon, or maybe they already are as we speak. I have failed, and you have failed. Null, the manifestation of darkness. Faith Vorgeth, the Null of carnage. Those are fancy titles wrapped around our beings to hide our failures. It's foolish to remain disillusioned at this point. I have not failed, he said, and in the next moment, Faith Vorgeth opened his palms, revealing a simple ball. The sight of them made Null's eyes widen. It was the Null domain still contained in a ball shape. You found it. With this, you have not failed either, have you? Faith Vorgeth said, as Null's brows creased in suspicion. What are you planning, Faith Vorgeth? Come with me to the Hallowworms, and I may consider forgiving your atrocities. Ha ha ha. Null burst into laughter, his chained body shaking uncontrollably. You mean follow you to certain death? With me, it's certain death for you anyway. I cannot die, Faith Vorgeth.
Ipusas no soul.
Null's words echoed calmly. Even if you rid me of all my existence runes, so long as one more Null remains alive, I will linger. And when more of them begin to exist and their bloodline concentration rises high enough, I will return. There's always hope for me. But they, the supreme races, they possess enough God tools to completely erase me from existence. Walking there is walking to certain death. And the same is true for you. This is our end, Faith Vorgeth. Make peace with it. Null said to him, A long silence followed. Then, a single word broke through it.
No.
We were wrong. The golden system panel flickered before Ryuk, who lay resting at the bottom of the ocean, eyes gazing upward toward the filtering rays of sunlight. His fingers rose slightly, letting the golden rays pass through his energy-formed hands, refracting faint blue light across his face. Yes, we were, he replied silently. I used to think you were just being childish with your hatred toward Thaythvorgith, refusing to call him father and despising being called his son and all that. But now, I think differently. It's almost like you already knew how much he ruined your life. What does it matter, though? Ryuk thought quietly. Oh, I could blame him, curse him, or hate him for all eternity. What difference would it make? His hands closed, leaving only one finger extended toward the drifting light. The past is the past, huh? Perhaps it's time you really just leave the past behind. He had always chased the past, for as long as he could remember, seeking the nulls, reclaiming what had been stolen from him in the past, trying to uncover what had happened in the past. Now he knew it all, but it was anything but worth it. Perhaps it's time I truly let it all go. A faint shimmer glowed across his palm as a golden pyramid materialized above it. It held the final thing he was missing, his soul. On the brighter side, you get to regain what was rightfully yours. Maybe it's not all meaningless. The panel flickered, light glinting briefly in Ryuk's eyes before they dulled once again. What use was any of it? What? Even when I didn't have my skeletal system from Null, I could still stand just fine. Even without my muscular system from Azragoth, I could still lift tons. Even without my nervous system, I could still see, feel, and think clearly. I could love just right, hate just right, smile just right, walk just right, laugh just right. I already had it all, didn't I? But I wanted it so desperately still. Maybe because they were part of your truth. But all of it was mostly to prepare for them, the calamities. The fear of them coming one day and taking everything I had. Now that I think about it, hasn't my entire life been ruled by that single emotion, fear? It may have, but the threats of losing everything back then, too, were real. The panel blinked softly. Ryuk hummed under his breath. Besides, that fear is gone now. The calamities are dead. Null is off your back. Thaythvorgith is free, keeping the remaining nulls away, if any still survive their incoming extinction. You're free now, Ryuk. I'm free. Bubbles escaped his lips, floating upward, carrying the sound of those words through the water. Ah, of course. Freedom. How could I have forgotten that? He mused softly, a faint halo of relief spreading over his otherwise expressionless face. The dragons. There's a chance they might still be alive, even if only faintly. What do you plan to do? Ryuk stared in silence for a long moment before answering. I thought the dragons all died waging war to protect me. They're Draconis. But that's not the case. They went on the orders of their queen. And as for their queen, she waged war to free Thaythvorgith. She fought for love. Reasonable? Maybe. But now Thaythvorgith is free, and she's the one imprisoned. The only logic is for Thaythvorgith to do what she once did. For him. To wage war for her. Whatever happens, it has nothing to do with me anymore. His eyes slowly closed as memories flickered through his mind. Memories of her. She was a woman so strong, and yet so gentle. How beautiful would it have been if there was no war at all? If the nulls and dragons had coexisted in peace, and Halorayada had never been born. Though you fought for love, you were still kind enough to keep me safe from it all. I'll honor that by living well from now on. Mother. Ryuk thought quietly. A rift silently opened before him, glowing with a soft milky white hue. From within emerged an enormous draconic form. His true body. Scars lined its scales, and a hollow crater gaped where its heart should have been. Ryuk reached forward, gently rubbing its metallic jaw, then slightly parted them. Opening his hand, he revealed the golden prism, his soul, and slowly placed it within the dragon's maw. The instant he did, a quiet ripple surged outward through the water. Ryuk extended his arm, gripping the edges of space itself and pulling open a vortex. With the last strength he had left, he pushed his draconic body into the fold between the dimensions. He had regained everything except his logic core, which remained in Aravel's possession. But he didn't think it was necessary to retrieve it. He still wasn't sure why he had chosen to return it to her. Besides, the logic core wouldn't change things much, fused or unfused, since he had his brain. The strain of the dimensional rift had drained every last ounce of energy from him. His vision dimmed, and his eyes began to close. But just before darkness consumed him, he felt two presences. They appeared above the sea, their shadows cascading down through the water as they slowly descended toward him. Ryuk felt a familiar aura amongst the presences. A presence that made his heart well up in a weird feeling. Nostalgia. But he was too tired now and just wanted to sleep. To sleep forever. Through a glass panel, golden rays of sunlight streamed in, illuminating the face of a figure. A face smooth as glass and white as snow. The rays also touched the strands of hair that fell over his face, as white as snow, tousling slightly with every touch of light. His eyes remained shut, but in the next moment, they slowly opened. A flicker of blue light shone from the depths of his ocean blue irises, and every ray of sunlight that touched them had its color changed to blue. He didn't blink. Instead, his face tilted faintly, turning toward the rays of light that filtered through the glass. A simple expression rested on his face, one hard to read. The next moment, he turned away from it and looked down at himself. Both of his hands were placed over his navel, the rest of his body hidden beneath the sheet. A special sheet, whose surface occasionally gleamed with light, casting illumination upon the simple white shirt and trousers he wore. It was almost like the sheet itself had been woven from starlight. He slowly sat up, then rose from the bed, his gaze turning toward the glass. Through it, he could see the world, a world of starlight. Closer to him were buildings, purple-walled castles that rose high into the violet void above. They clustered together, each seemingly part of a single grand structure. The floor was marble, veined with celestial light, reflecting the starlit purple sky above. It was mesmerizing, and Ryuk quietly turned his gaze up. The sky stretched wide, a deep purple melting into violet and indigo as countless starlights blinked steadily across the expanse. Shooting stars carved silver trails through the darkness, lingering for a moment before vanishing into nothing. It was night, and it felt endless, vast, and mesmerizing. For a few seconds, he felt quietly lost to the overwhelming beauty of the universe, but soon turned his gaze right back down. Across the marble floor walked a race of humanoid beings, but quite different, as their entire existence seemed to be made from starlight itself. They moved across the ground in pairs and groups, while some floated gracefully through the air. The world was alive with sound, the bustling and murmur of voices, but beneath it lingered a quiet peace. He looked beyond the clusters of castles and saw high-rising mountains encircling everything. Cascading down their surfaces were waterfalls radiating countless colors of light, born from the various crystals that made up the mountains. Grasses grew across their rocky surfaces, and glowing butterflies flickered among them. It was a different world, a world he had never seen before. He turned away from the view to look at the room he was in. It was a bedroom with the floor and walls crafted from the same luminous materials as the buildings outside. Blue starlight silently gleamed across its walls as he stepped forward toward a marble wardrobe at the side. A mirror rested above the marble table, and it caught his reflection. It was him, Ryuk. The red and jade blue scales that once marked his null and draconic bloodline were gone. So too were the sharp, angular lines that had once shaped his face. The face he saw now reminded him of his old self. The Ryuk, back on Endearth. It was as if he had reverted to that past version of himself, though his face now held more life and a mature, quiet calm. Something especially missing from the old Ryuk. Turning away from it all, he let his gaze fall upon the table, where a few portraits rested in silence. Picking one up, his blue irises lingered on it. There were several images of people he had never seen before. They were all female, but one of them stood out. A lady with long blue hair and blue eyes. The illumination from his eyes rose ever so faintly, and he picked up a second image. The picture was different, filled with other figures, yet the same blue-haired woman appeared once more, her hair now streaked with faint purple. He picked up a third, and again the same, then a fourth, and finally the last. This one was of her alone. Her hair had become a cascade of deep purple, threaded with blinking starlights of countless hues, the same celestial glow flickering within her eyes. Quietly, his fingers brushed across the glass frame, sliding a strand of her hair in the picture to the side of her face, though the image, of course, remained unchanged. Asteralaxia. He called out quietly, then turned slightly to see a figure standing at the entrance of the room, holding a few runic books in her hands. She froze, rooted in shock, as she looked at those blue irises silently gazing at her. Quietly, Ryuk watched as she took a step back out of the room, gently shutting the door. The book slipped from her hands as Aster covered her face, cheeks burning red. She could feel her heart pounding so loudly in her chest, the words echoing loudly in her head with every beat. He's awake. The thought made her ears turn ruby red, but she exhaled softly, forcing away the shyness. She raised her hands, starlight wrapping around the book, and placing it once more in her palms before she pushed open the door again. "Ryuk," she called, stepping into the room with renewed conviction, only for it to fade when she found him standing just a few inches away from her. He had moved, and now so close. It's been you." The words came out jumbled and rushed, but they all faded away as she felt herself gently pulled into his embrace. "I've missed you." The whisper rang softly in her ears. Her eyes widened, unable to believe, but after, they turned glassy as she wrapped her arms tightly around him, tears of starlight falling onto his shoulder. "I've missed you too. Missed you so much." New arc begins and Aster is finally back. Yesy. At first he found it confusing. What was this place, and how had he woken up only to find himself in Asteralaxia's room? She understood his confusion and offered to explain with a little walk around. This time, Ryuk got to see more of this world, and he quickly understood what it was. It was like a clan, filled with many cultivators. Though it was late at night, things only grew slightly quieter. There were still several beings walking around, and Ryuk naturally drew attention due to his differences, though none approached. They simply passed a nod to Aster, who returned their nods before walking past. "Most here are pure-blooded Stellus, and they're quite friendly once you get to know them," she said as he silently nodded. According to her, this place was known as the Stellus clan, a clan belonging to one of the most powerful astral cultivator races in the upper realm, the Stellus race. It took only about 10 minutes of walking before they reached their destination, a marble bridge, beneath which flowed a river whose surface reflected the starlit sky. It was a beautiful sight, the breeze silently whooshing past and sending their hair fluttering. "A favorite spot?" he asked, watching her lean slightly over the bridge, taking in a quiet inhale before exhaling deeply. "The most favorite spot," she replied with a smile, turning her head to look at him. They stared silently, and she noticed his eyes slowly shifting toward her ears. She immediately knew. They've turned red again. The realization made her feel like jumping into the river. "How did you find me? I don't remember ever using this," he said, his hand shifting out as the device appeared. It was the same device she had sent for Isha to give to him after her departure. Something to be used only during an emergency. Her embarrassment faded in that moment, replaced by focus. "It was Lord Stella," she said. "She's the mightiest in the Stellus clan and one of the 7 lords of ER." Ryuk quietly remembered that. "You mean the Anomalous Existence Regulation Corp?" he asked, and a gleam of quiet surprise crossed her eyes. "You know that?" "I do," he replied. "Lord Stella summoned me about 2 months ago, asking me to come with her. We descended upon the barren world of Iodio, where we found you in slumber underwater," she explained. And it finally dawned on Ryuk. The AER had tried to make him come with them the last time under the order of one they called Lord Asgard, but they had failed. Ryuk could tell they wouldn't give up after that. Not when their mission was to maintain order in the universe, and he had nearly rendered the Null race half extinct. They must have tracked his location and sent one of the lords to him, Lord Stella. As for why she had brought Astralaxia along, it was probably due to the thought that her presence would make him come willingly. But he had been in slumber then, and that had never been needed. One thing left him in quiet contemplation, though. How had she joined the AER? Was it because she was an anomaly? Or did something happen on her journey? "Your mind," she said, bringing his attention back to her. "It's very hard to read. But I can tell from your expression that you're confused by something," Aster said. She had tried reading his mind, to listen to his thoughts, but it was like ramming an egg against a sky-reaching mountain. Simply unshakable. But his facial expressions were still vivid. "The Stellus clan is part of the AER, right?" he asked, and she nodded. "Then I was just wondering how you got here. I thought you would have returned to the Sol Flora race," he said. She was part of the Sol Flora race, and he had thought she would have returned there, though she had also mentioned having some trouble with her family and the Eternal Warlock of War. "I never went back," she said, and he paused. "On my journey back, I got into a little bit of a pinch, ended up getting myself abducted by a void pirate group," she continued. "But we were all saved by the AER, and that's where I met Lord Stella, who just happened to be of the same race as I am. She took me in, and I joined the Stellus clan," she explained, and he nodded. Now things were a lot clearer. "Miss Home?" he asked, and she paused for a while before responding. "Sol Floris used to be home. Now, it's not anymore. She still hasn't made amends with her royal sisters," he thought silently. "But even though it's been less than 3 years, this place is quite great too. Difficult at first, you could bet, but it became safer, more comfortable. And now it's my new home," she said with an exhale. He looked at her silently, noticing how carefree she seemed as she spoke. She truly felt this place was her new home. At that moment, a small smile tugged at the corner of his lips, followed by a sensation. His heart grew warm, its beat becoming firmer and alive. It was strange, almost unsettling, yet gentle. He silently pressed a hand against his chest. "I've never felt this before," he thought, the warmth spreading like a current through his body, almost as if her happiness had somehow awakened something sleeping inside him. "That's empathic warmth." The panel blinked before his face, then silently faded. "What about you? I remember you were after the goal of reconciling with your race and getting back all that was taken from you. How's that going?" she asked, blinking her starlight eyes in curiosity. "I did get back all that was taken from me," he said, raising his hand and staring at it. The sight made a smile bloom on her face. "That's great. I never got to reconcile with them, though." "Oh," she mused silently before saying, "You know, everyone's talking about it now." He turned to her. "About the Null's disappearance. There have been news and reports of the calamities being destroyed by someone unknown, and all of a sudden, the Null domain doesn't exist anymore, and no Null can be found. And you're a Null, if I remember correctly," she added, and he silently nodded. "I never planned on reconciling with the Nulls, as I never saw them as family. The ones I did plan to reconcile with were the dragons, and I failed." "Failed?" Astralaxia asked, her brows creasing slightly before she breathed out a soft, thoughtful sound. "That's a word I never thought could be associated with you." Her musing made Ryuk's heartbeat unconsciously quicken, but it settled quickly enough, and he grew amused. "What am I to you? Some unfailing god?" he asked, and she giggled. "No, not really. At first, You were some dumb kid I planned to use to get out of the domain I was trapped in. And after you were another dumb kid with a dumb plan to save his world from destruction. And then a kid who might actually pull it off. Then finally, a young man who did. She recalled each stage with a soft smile. You were the farthest thing from a god, but you did seem like one in some ways. The only thing I think you will ever fail in, Ryuk, is something you haven't thought out well enough, or something that simply isn't worth it to you. I believe if it's truly what you want, like reconciling with the dragons, then you will reconcile with them no matter what it takes. She turned fully to him as she said that. His eyes were filled with doubt as he stared silently at the river. Doubt in himself. Doubt in what he was capable of. Even if they're all maybe dead? He asked, only for his face to be gently turned toward her as he met her starlit eyes. Then I'm sure you'll find a way to bring them back from the dead. The sound of his heartbeat echoed clearly from his chest as a glint crossed his eyes. Bring them back from the dead? Ryuk knew he had been doing one thing wrong when he thought of the dragon, and that was hoping they were alive. But Halorayata had captured them, and they had been labeled dead to the universe. The logical action after that would have been their true erasure. There was no reason for dragons to still exist. No reason for any of them to have survived. But now that he thought about it, even if they had gone extinct, couldn't he bring them back to life? He had done it before, like with Iravel, reversing the time of her death and bringing her back. The repercussions from the heavens had nearly destroyed him, yes. And that revival had only succeeded because he acted so quickly after she died. But still, that art, bringing someone back from death, he had only done it unconsciously. What if he actually took the time to study it? What if he truly mastered it? What if one day he could bring anything or anyone back from death, blurring the line between life and the beyond? Did I really fail to reconcile with the dragons? Or did I simply think them not worthy enough? I told myself that it should be Faith Vorgoth who frees them, since they freed him, yet as much as I try to deny, I know deep in my heart I chose this because of fear. Fear of going through all the trouble of looking for the dragons myself, only for my worst nightmare to come true. But I know I really want to see her, even if it's just once. I want to see what she looks like. Thank you, he said to Astralaxia. She smiled, withdrawing her hands from his face and hugging her arms around herself. Silence continued for a while before she turned slightly, watching him stare into the distance. You've changed so much, she whispered. He turned to her. Have I? I mean, you're the one with the purple hair and star eyes. That, she called, pausing as her face grew flustered. That wasn't even my fault. It was the Stellus manual I cultivate, she muttered, watching him stare at her flustered state with amusement. You know, in a way, I thought this change of mine would keep you away, or maybe make you not recognize me. I even tried dyeing it back to blue, but that was just dumb. She sighed, and truthfully, Aster was very different now. She used to be that lady with blue hair and blue eyes. Now she had purple hair and star-filled eyes. The only reason Ryuk adapted quickly to the change was that he had seen the portraits showing her slow transformation over the years. Without those, recognizing her might have been difficult. Though it doesn't seem to affect you that much, does it? She asked. He shook his head.
No.
Mostly thanks to those portraits of yours. It dawned on her instantly. When she had entered the room, he had been holding one of her portraits. A thought struck her, and her ears reddened again. How long were you awake in my room? She asked. Not very long. Maybe less than 3 minutes before you walked in. She visibly exhaled. And, how long have I been in your room? He asked. The red spread from her neck to her face as she buried her face in her hands. 2 months, she said, peeking through a small gap between her fingers at his expression. It was pretty normal, though he now wore that annoyingly amused look, the same look someone gives a flustered child. What? I didn't do anything weird, she defended. Anything weird? He echoed, and Aster felt like throwing herself into the river. I'm surprised Lord Stella allowed you to keep me in your room, he suddenly said. She paused, turning to him. Do you know her? She asked. He shook his head. No, I don't. But if she could find me, she must know me. I get pretty destructive when I'm in slumber, but maybe she doesn't know that. I actually do. A voice echoed right after, and it wasn't from Ryuk or Aster. A soft radiance spilled out from the necklace resting on Aster's neck, and in the next moment, the phantom of a being appeared between them. Lord Stella, Aster called out in shock as Ryuk silently stared at the figure before him. It was a humanoid being, and just like the rest of the Stellus race, she was formed entirely from starlight. She wore a long gown woven from the same celestial glow, a hood draped over her head like flowing night. But what set her apart was the 8 eyes embedded across her face. Only 2 were open. The remaining 6 rested as closed slits along her cheeks. How did you? Aster asked, unconsciously turning to her necklace. It had indeed been a gift from her master, Lord Stella. But she had never known it held a fragment of her consciousness. Though I allowed you to keep Ryuk Null close to you, because you annoyed me enough to eventually say yes, she said, and Aster's cheeks turned red. She had indeed begged her relentlessly. What you didn't know was that Ryuk has been termed an SS-grade chaotic being by the AER. SS grade? Aster shouted, dumbfounded. If such a being explodes, you can't stop it, friend or not. So I had to keep an eye on him myself, and that's why I chose to remain in your necklace. The explanation made everything clearer for Astralaxia. With that, Lord Stella turned her attention to Ryuk. Though we've met many times, this is the first time I'm seeing you in full consciousness, she said.
I'm Stella D'Amatio.
Since we're in the EAR, just call me Lord Stella. She extended her glowing hand. Ryuk didn't think too deeply before accepting the handshake. Ryuk, for one responsible for the Null's half-extinction, and Lord Asgard's greatest worry, you seem far calmer than the tales of destruction surrounding you, she noted. Ryuk said nothing. If it had been the previous him, he would have stared straight into her soul without accepting the handshake at all. After all, she had labeled him an SS-grade chaotic being. She was a lord in the EAR, a group whose mission to maintain order could also be interpreted as hunting chaotic entities. They weren't supposed to be speaking like this, but now he found it difficult to summon those old logical hostilities. You freed Aster from danger and took her in, sparing her the troubles she would have faced if she'd returned to her race. And this place was good enough for her to call her new home. Thank you for that, he said, releasing her hand. A faint glint passed through her eyes at his words. Would you believe me if I said that's what we do in the EAR? She asked with a small smile. Ryuk chuckled. I won't. Fair enough. I won't take up more of your time, but some matters must be discussed between us, the EAR, lords and you, Ryuk. So when you have free time, visit the Stella Prism. With that, she dissolved into motes of starlight and drifted into the purple sky. I swear I never knew, Astralaxia muttered, turning to Ryuk. He watched the trail of stars for a moment before silently looking away. She seems quite chill though, he said. A faint glint of jealousy flickered in Aster's eyes before fading. Think you have a chance with her? She asked with an evil grin. Ryuk's expression didn't change. Would you be fine with that? That was the last thing she expected him to say, and it left her dumbfounded. I mean, sure. If it keeps both of you happy, she muttered, quickly turning away. He stared at her for a moment. If you keep considering others at the expense of pain to yourself, you'll be the one hurt the most in the end, he said. I know that, Aster answered softly. She had always stepped back from things she wanted, just to make others happy, just like with him when she had given him up to Morgaine. But I can bear the pain, she said, turning to Ryuk with a confident smile. You can't, he replied curtly. How? And how are you so sure? She retorted, and Ryuk simply shrugged, turning away in silence, but she held him, saying, I want to know. The answer might hurt, though? he said, this time pretty seriously. I can bear the pain. She responded again, and a glint crossed his eyes before he responded. You've been here for 3 years, right? Yes. If I may ask, why are you still not in a relationship? A red glow crept up her ears. And what does that have to do with anything? Just answer. I'm not interested in love. That's not true, he said immediately. Or maybe because I haven't found someone I love. You don't just jump into a relationship without love, do you? She countered. Ryuk hummed. So you're saying no one's shown interest in a beauty like you all these years? She wanted to nod, but turned her face away. They have. Quite a lot. And did you give love a chance? Before she could answer, an evil idea crossed her mind. You know, I actually did for many. We held hands, went on dates, slept in the same room every night, she said, giving Ryuk a side eye. He smiled lightly, watching her. What? Jealous? She teased. Sounds like you're reciting your unfulfilled wishes, he said. Her expression collapsed instantly as she humphed. So, you still didn't give love a chance, did you? He asked. Her fingers tightened faintly around the bridge rail. Not yet. Why not? I already told you. I'm just not interested in love, she responded with a shrug. Or maybe, Ryuk said. But then the breeze flapped, and in the next moment, his back was against the railings, both her hands over his lips. Don't you dare say it, she said fiercely, as Ryuk's hand moved, taking off a finger. Maybe be. He tried to say it, only for her to cover his lips once more, but he pushed her hand off quickly. Maybe because you. She shut him up once more with her hand over his mouth. But his hand reached forward, grabbing both her arms and holding them firmly to the side. Maybe because UGA. The words were never completed when Aster leaned forward, her lips gently locking against his. His almost expressionless face changed, gaining a faint red halo as his heart skyrocketed within his chest. Felt different. The feeling. It had always been slightly blurry. All he knew was that it was different from what he was used to, but now it felt so clear. His hands holding her arms relaxed, and Aster paused, backing off. Her face had grown from red to pink, and she couldn't bear to look him in the eye, hugging her hands around herself while she stared at her feet. I know why, she said, stepping to the railings as she gazed silently at the floating star river beneath. I never had another relationship, even with those who genuinely would have loved to be in a relationship. I just couldn't get myself to say yes to them. Almost like I could just never love anymore. Aster. I thought eventually, with time, the feelings would fade, but they never did. So long as I had that communicator in my hands, the feelings just never died. And the number of times I slept off with it held tight in my grasp, I can't even count. Many times I wanted to call, but I also didn't want to hurt you or her. And you're right, Ryuk. If you place people at an expense to which you get hurt, then you'll be the one getting hurt the most. I learned that the hard way. But I can bear the pain? Aster mused before she scoffed. That's just a dumb lie I tell myself to make things hurt less. She turned to him, asking, do you have any idea how it felt losing one of the only things that gave you genuine peace and the most lasting memory of happiness you ever had in your centuries of existence? Especially when you learn you gave up that thing because you chose to, not because you had no choice or anything. It's just so dumb. I'm so dumb, she whispered, covering her face with both. Is it, though? Ryuk asked as she paused, turning to him. You gave it up because you cared. That just goes to show how much you wished for my happiness. And that's not in any way being dumb. He said it, and she could tell he was serious. I don't want to hurt her. She turned away, but a finger appeared beneath her chin, gently turning her gaze back to his. Morgane is like you, Ryuk said, and it left her lost for words. As much as you wish for me to be happy, she wishes the same. She would never wish to see me sad because I have someone I love but can't love, because I'm with her. In the end, just like with you, she would have compromised, but that leads me to think, Why is it that we can't all agree that what we have for each other is true, and simply live with that together? He asked, as her heartbeat unconsciously skyrocketed. Why is it that someone must get hurt for another person's love, even though they both love the same person? Would my loving you now mean the love I have for her is automatically untrue or fake for some reason? What if she says no? Astralaxia asked. He replied, if you were Morgaine, would you have said no? Ryuk asked in return, and her brows creased before she muttered. I would be jealous, she responded. Jealous enough to stop loving me for it? He asked, and she fell silent. Would she have stopped loving him if she were Morgaine? How could she, after seeing and understanding just how much she loved him, too? She wouldn't understand, she murmured in conviction as Ryuk chuckled. I don't think that's for you to decide. And just so you know, it's not only Morgaine I love, he said, and she snapped her head toward him. What? You fell in love with others? She asked in disbelief, and he nodded. How many are they? She asked, and an evil idea snaked through Ryuk's mind. About 50 more? Her jaw dropped. What? Even the eternal warlock of war, with his little power, has an endless harem of women, doesn't he? What would you expect from an SS-level chaotic being? He asked. You're not him, Esther snapped back. In any way of comparison, you're not like him at all. So I don't expect you would have an endless harem simply because of power. Or have you? She asked cautiously. Even though Lord Stella had mentioned he was an SS-level chaotic being, a being whose threat level was insane, she still stayed by his side and spoke her heart because she believed she knew him and that he was himself regardless of his power. But now there was cause for alarm. Seeing the caution in her eyes, Ryuk almost burst out in laughter, his serious expression eventually giving way, and she exhaled in relief when she saw that goofy smile. You really believed I'm in love with 50 women? I don't. But your power does give a chance for that possibility, so I couldn't be so sure. So, how many other women are you in love with? Be honest, she asked, and he decided to come clean. One more woman. Her name is Odette. I want to know more, she said. Well, if there's one thing you must know about her, it's the fact that she will kill you if she learns you were with me. Wah? Her scream Ryuk found amusing. Tell me you're joking, she said, and he shook his head. No, actually, I'm not. That's wild, she mused beneath her breath. Ryuk fell silent for a while, brows furrowed, before he turned and said, You know, in a way, you're also like Odette. The only difference is, while you see me with Morgaine and say, I don't want to break what they have, so I'll sacrifice myself and leave, Odette thinks, so, he's with Morgaine too, huh? Then I'll just kill her and have him for myself. Ryuk said this while watching Aster's face. At first, she held disbelief, but when she saw Ryuk's normal expression, the horror set in. Don't tell me you find that normal? She said, and he nodded. While I do think it sounds a bit extreme, I actually admire that, he said. Because you enjoy the feeling of someone being obsessed so much they'll kill for you? She asked, and he shook his head. Not like that, really. Odette, to me, embodies power. Ryuk explained. Power to make a decision and follow through unblind by anything else. Mercy, empathy for others' feelings. Those things just cause unnecessary headaches that most times derail a person from their goal. Just like how your empathy for Morgaine blocked you from me. Odette cuts all of that off without thinking twice and seizes what she wants for herself. She's not just powerful. Her personality itself is filled with power. And that's one of the things I admire. But don't worry, Morgaine is fine. And I'm only confident of that because she promised to look after her while I'm gone. So I'm not worried that anything might go wrong at all. That's one of the advantages of her powerful personality, he said, and a glow flickered through Aster's eyes. You truly love her, she mused silently to herself. He had not spoken much, yet when he talked of her, she could see the glow in his eyes. He truly admired her. That was clear enough. And hey, I never said I was with you or going to be. She shot at him, watching him roll his eyes. Even after the... he said with a wink, watching her face grow pink. That was just... She had yet to finish those words when the rosy red lips wrapped around hers. The thought of fighting back never even reached the first seat of her mind before it disappeared as her eyes instantly rolled to the back of her head. But only for a moment, as he suddenly parted. Why did you st? She realized her own words only after she completed the sentence, and he chuckled mockingly at her. Stop? Could it be that you wanted me to continue? He teased, and she humphed. Shut up. She shot at him, and in the next moment, her hands reached out, grabbing his wrist as she zoomed into the sky. Hey, what are you? Ryuk said. But then he turned his gaze beneath him. Being so high in the sky, the buildings were much clearer, and the beauty of it all was breathtaking. It's really not a bad place, he mused to himself. But he also realized one thing quickly enough. I can't fly. But he never needed to. Aster brought him back to the corridor of her place, and he found himself back where he had awoken. Her room. On a second thought, I think it's... He got silenced when she kissed him, and soon enough, he was on the bed with her over him. What do you plan to do? He asked, and he watched her swerve to his side before her hands moved and the wardrobe opened, a bed sheet coming out and covering them both to their necks. She wrapped around him tightly like a snake, before giving him a kiss that lasted almost 15 seconds, and finally buried herself into his chest, whispering, "Good night." She said this as her breath slowly grew softer. Ryuk looked at the woman in his arms, smirking at his thoughts before exhaling in relief. She seemed to notice his relieved exhale, opening an eye and staring up at him. "What?" he asked, and she grinned. "Scared." "Of what?" he asked, feigning ignorance. Aster found it all even more amusing. Quite some years must have passed. But, "You're still the dumb boy I know," she said with a giggle, hugging him tighter. His heart pumping just by her face created a feeling she could not explain. She had dreamed of holding him close like this, and not secretly like she had been doing for the past 2 months, as that had been filled with fear. Fear of him waking suddenly and pushing her away. But now she could. She finally could. She had 1,000,001 things she planned to do with him, but for tonight, she would keep it at this. You finally got back with Astralaxia. That's good. The panel blinked, surprising Ryuk quite a bit. His romance life was something the system never really commented on much. It was as if it could read his thoughts as it continued. To me, it's the only logical love you have. Morgaine's love seems more of a fangirling type, and Odette's just psychotic. Imagine falling in love with a woman who sucks your blood. What have you even become, you weirdo? The system shot, and Ryuk almost burst out loud in laughter. But Aster really helped, and she did that to the best of her ability. Without her belief and support back on Endearth, I don't see a way for you to win the war against the Nulls, and that win you had more or less shaped every other win you've had up until now. So yes, I'm glad you both eventually worked things out, said before blinking off, and Ryuk exhaled. He could still remember the words she had spoken to him. The only thing I think you will ever fail in, Ryuk, is something you haven't thought out well enough, or something that simply isn't worth it to you. Those words couldn't have come at a better time, as now he knew his next path. Through a glass panel, golden rays of sunlight streamed in, illuminating 2 figures on a bed. One of them was Ryuk, elbows pressed into the mattress, hands gently propping up his head. Wrapped around him like a boa constrictor to a tree was a lady with purple hair, none other than Astralaxia. She seemed deeply asleep, but the moment one of Ryuk's fingers reached out and slid over the tip of her nose, she shook slightly, then hugged him even tighter. His finger reached out again, sliding a second time, slower and more deliberate. She paused, her brows quivering. Then one of her eyes slowly blinked open. The first thing she saw was the golden light, half blocked by Ryuk's face, painting the white of his skin with a warm glow that made his expression look even softer. Then she saw him looking down at her, amused, just short of giggling, like he had been waiting for her to wake up. What? She forced out, her voice low and rough from sleep. He tilted his head slightly, letting the sunlight fall directly on her face again, playful without saying a word. She winced at the sudden brightness, but in the next instant, a realization struck her. Wait, it is already morning? She shot upright like a startled rabbit. How did I? She whispered, eyes widening. She was never the type to sleep until morning. Even though the clan required most students to return to their quarters at night, Stellus did not exactly need long hours of rest. Their bodies were built differently, especially her. She normally barely slept at all, yet she had slept long enough for the sunlight to be right over her. That alone made her chest tighten in mild panic. She rushed over to her study table, packing up the runic books, and that was when it hit her again. "TSK, I did not even do the homework," she muttered, slapping her forehead. She quickly stuffed the books away, combed her hair with frantic gestures that barely fixed anything, then sprinted toward the door. Before leaving, she froze, spun around, ran back, jumped over Ryuk, kissed him, and whispered, "I will be back soon." Then she dashed out again. The door closed, leaving Ryuk alone. He rose from the bed and moved to the window, watching the purple blur of her figure flash across the grounds. He grinned before musing quietly, "Dummy." He had woken earlier and seen Stellus's experts walking around with runic books in hand. He remembered Aster bringing similar books back the previous day. Most likely, he thought she was meant to join them in their classes, and he was right. His gaze shifted from the ground to the far distance. Near the horizon of the waterfall stood a massive prism-shaped structure, its surface etched with runes and streaked with flowing starlight that pulsed in slow waves. "Stella Prism," he whispered. That was the place where he had been summoned to meet her, Lord Stella. He turned back to the room. There was little to do besides the bed, which he finished in under 3 minutes, smoothing the sheets with casual ease. He opened the door and stepped out, walking through the quiet corridor toward the stairs. Almost all the students had gone to classes, so the residence was unusually silent, the air still and cool. He crossed the academy grounds, walking over a bridge, then through a garden filled with multicolored flowers that glimmered like starlight caught inside petals. When his hand brushed over them, sparkles of light rose and wove around him before floating into the sky in soft, drifting motions. He continued walking, stepping out of the garden and onto a mountainous path that twisted upwards. The terrain was rocky and uneven, but Ryuk's steps remained steady. He slowed a bit, adjusting to the incline, but did not trip even once. The morning wind brushed against him and carried faint scents of flowers and starlight dust. Soon he reached another bridge. Beneath it was only deep darkness, sprinkled with blinking motes of purple far below, creating the illusion of a star-filled void beneath him. "I wonder what is down there," he murmured, but kept walking. He crossed the entire length of the bridge and reached the end of the path. Before him lay the prism's base, with a staircase of 3,000 short steps rising all the way to the entrance. He placed his foot on the first step, paused for a breath, then resumed climbing. Unhurried as always, he walked the entire 3,000, taking nearly an hour. At the top, he turned around. From here, the entire Stellus clan grounds spread out clearly beneath him, glowing with morning starlight. The gardens shimmered, the starlit towers gleamed, and the waterfall cast tiny rainbow arcs into the air. He turned back to face the enormous starlight door rising 100 meters high, its surface rippling faintly like a living veil. Pressing both hands against it, starlight bloomed across the door's surface, forming intricate lines that pulsed outward, and it slowly pushed open with a deep, low hum. A flurry of starlight washed over his face as he stepped inside. When the lights faded, Ryuk looked around and found himself in a void overflowing with shimmering starlight stretching out infinitely, soft and silent. And he was not alone. At the center of the void was a single seat, and Ryuk walked to it, taking his place. He lifted his head slightly. Hanging above him like celestial phantoms were 7 distinct beings. Only one was familiar, Lord Stella. 4 of her eyes were open instead of 2, each containing a swirling galaxy filled with celestial bodies. Interesting, Ryuk murmured, his voice echoing through the void. He walked the entire length of the distance, never once running or flying. One of the 7 lords spoke. Ryuk turned to face him. This lord looked humanoid, but his body was made of pure silver, like living liquid glass. He had no eyes and no expression, only a smooth mask for a face. I find it interesting when someone takes their time with things. The being continued, the quicksilver of his face shifting and forming the pattern of a flowing stream. A loud, disdainful scoff cut through the space right after those words. He is a monster. The one who had spoken was a peculiar-looking lord. He was far from humanoid, more beastly, with 2 large golden deer-like horns jutting from the upper sides of his crystalline face. Speaking of his face, it seemed carved from countless crystal fragments, each one a different color and material, shifting subtly as if alive. Though beastly, a divine aura radiated from him. As impatient as ever you are, Lord Valkar, the lord who had spoken of Ryuk's patience said to him. Lord Valkar answered with another powerful scoff. I am not impatient, Lord Jerwenin, but more efficient. He smells like a killer, and has killed before, hence a killer. Get rid of him, meeting over. Lord Valkar roared out, staring at Ryuk with narrowed eyes. The man's expression remained neutral. Not even a flicker of unease crossed his face, despite the casual way they discussed killing him. TSK. Look at him, acting all cool, even after everything he mostly relies on has been taken away from him. Another lord said, drawing Ryuk's attention. This one was a woman. Long orange hair poured down like a waterfall into the void surrounding them. Her face was mostly humanoid, though half of it was covered in oscillating gear-like runes. The same runic mechanics coated her fox-like eyes, which narrowed at Ryuk as if attempting to pierce straight into his soul. You may be right, Ryuk replied, causing the lords to pause. I cannot feel the soul bonds I have with my beasts, nor can I feel any of the rifts I possess. I was just wondering about that not long ago. Ryuk was telling the truth. He had bonded with Isha, Void, Zafri, and the Abyssal Kraken King. Yet right now he felt none of those bonds. It was as if they no longer existed. His connection to the Techno Ruin Forge was gone as well, and the familiar tether to the Void Azura Rift had vanished. Even his link to the Garden of Mechirasa had disappeared entirely. That is because everything connected to your soul has been severed, leaving you bare and limited solely to your own power, she explained. As for your rifts, they are in our expository with a seized status. Her mechanical runes clicked in amusement, clearly expecting a reaction from him. 2 of my pets are in one of them. I hope you let them out before stowing it away, Ryuk asked calmly. Her grin faltered, and her brows creased. I would be more worried about you than some void cat or ice dragon if I were you. Ryuk nodded and reclined slightly in the seat. I guess that is a yes then. Good. Tis it you? She began, anger rising, when a gentle ripple of golden energy passed through the void and silenced the hall instantly. The ripple came from a raised hand from another lord. He had a dark complexion, with pointed ears reminiscent of an elf. What drew Ryuk's attention most were his eyes. They shone like miniature suns, golden bulbs burning with restrained ferocity. On his forehead rested a half-moon-shaped halo that leaked soft golden light, and his curly golden hair framed his face like cascading flames. The hall remained utterly silent as his hand lowered again, his golden eyes turning toward Ryuk. I am Lord Asgard, he said, and a faint flicker of light moved through Ryuk's eyes. That name sounded familiar, and he had heard it mentioned more than once. Did Seer and the others tell you about how I feel about you? Ryuk asked, and Lord Asgard nodded. Their words from you went along the lines of, I want to believe that this Lord Asgard is a powerful being, and naturally, his judgment must be absolute. So if he believes you all can take me on and bring me back, then you must be capable of capturing me and bringing me back. If you fail to capture me, then that means he is a being of poor judgment. His words echoed through the void, and some of the other lords shifted in their seats. And, Ryuk asked mildly, they failed. But does that make you think I am a being of poor judgment? Lord Asgard asked. Naturally, Ryuk replied without any change in expression. Seer, Finks, and Zera, 3 from AR. They had been sent to capture him on Lord Asgard's orders, and they had failed. The failure did not paint a very impressive picture of Asgard in Ryuk's mind, though the respect the other lords had for him was undeniable. I have been watching you for quite a long time now, Ryuk, Lord Asgard said. A golden light bloomed at the center of the hall, forming an image of a large world-like sphere. Its surface was covered in countless golden lights of varying brightness. Ryuk's eyes were drawn to one particular light, one that burned brighter than most. Right from the moment of your birth, your anomaly light shone brighter than many. But after your severance, it dropped drastically, Lord Asgard continued. The golden light dimmed rapidly in the projection, shrinking to a near-invisible glimmer. Years passed, and it remained the same, until you encountered another anomaly light, one named Amiris von Loren. Ryuk remembered that name well. High Scholar Amiris. He was the one who had fused him with the other Anunnaki model. Through predatory fate sharing, you absorbed his anomaly light and strengthened your own. That wasn't something Ryuk was aware of. From there, your anomaly flared brighter and brighter, eventually surpassing even your original light, Lord Asgard said. In the projection, Ryuk's anomaly light brightened again, and now it has brightened that it overshadows even your original. He said, and all eyes in the room turned to the ball, which had a golden light upon its surface, burning like the sun. That was his current anomaly light, and truly, it was beyond any other light Ryuk saw on the ball's surface. I did make many poor decisions, one of them being not keeping you under strict watch sooner. But you were indeed quite the anomaly, as I have never seen such a dramatic surge in anomaly light before. Lord Asgard paused. I suppose that to a true anomaly, even an anomaly watcher can fail in his judgment. Your words sound similar to praises, Ryuk noted, slowly rising to his feet. It is well deserved, Lord Asgard replied, as all 7 watched him walk over to the ball containing those shining golden lights. So these are the anomaly lights? Ryuk asked, his hand gently spinning the ball. Yes, they are, Lord Asgard replied as Ryuk silently swiped the ball. There were a lot of golden lights, and each of these correlated to the number of anomalies that existed out there. And each of those lights you see, Ryuk, constitutes about 70% of the chaos that happens in this universe, Lord Asgard added. A glint crossed Ryuk's eyes on the mention of that. If you aim to maintain order in the universe, it makes more sense that you would choose to look over each of them. He mused quietly. Though the scale was universal, Ryuk could simulate something much smaller. He could imagine a jungle where 70% of the beasts were responsible for the chaos within. If he wanted to maintain order, then naturally keeping an eye on those 7-0 was one of the quickest ways to resolve the problem. There are a lot, he mused beneath his breath, though it still rang clear within the void. Yes, Lord Asgard said, then added. That's why some manage to slip out of radar, only appearing when their anomaly lights get brighter. You're wrong, Ryuk said quietly, resulting in many of the other lords furrowing their eyebrows. 90% of these lights are out of your radar, all shining the same. You don't really focus on each light, do you? I mean, they're in the hundreds of millions. You can't really keep track of that much. So the better approach is to wait for their anomaly light to grow and become eye-catching amongst even other anomaly lights. Only then do you keep an eye on them or deploy forces. How can something you're not even watching slip out of your radar? He mused to himself, though Lord Asgard's hands raised silently, folding into each other. Interesting observation, and you're actually right. There are indeed stages to anomaly lights from E to SSS. From which stage do you start to keep watch? He asked. C, Lord Asgard replied, before continuing. Those at E and D can only cause so much damage. They're usually not powerful enough to destroy a world, so they're ignored. But those at the sea level upward are watched. He explained, and Ryuk paused for a while before asking, "And at which grade do you deploy force to destroy them?" Lord Asgard smiled. "What do you see us as, destroyers?" he asked, though Ryuk's expression remained neutral. "You can correct me if I'm wrong. We don't really destroy. If we did, we'd just be becoming what we're trying to avoid," he explained. "But there are indeed anomalies out there that just can't be reasoned with, so they're killed for the sake of peace and order. We also don't have a stage to destroy. We have a stage to watch over them, which is C, and then a stage to send someone from the EAR to them, which is A. You offer for them to join?" Ryuk asked as the Lord paused. "That's actually correct. We offer them to join us. They possess enough power and qualification for that after all, and we help quell their chaos while further boosting the power of the EAR. A win-win situation, don't you think?" he asked. "Maybe it is. But what if they take one look at your face and don't like it? What do you do then?" Ryuk asked, raising his head to look directly at Lord Asgard, who remained silent. "You Destro. Actually, I take that back. You kill them for the sake of peace and order, right?" he asked, using the exact term he had spoken earlier. "Great power comes with great responsibilities, and one of those responsibilities is using your power to protect those lesser in power. This is the core of the EAR. If you disagree, you're trying to avoid responsibility, making yourself a walking time bomb whose single mistake can lead to the erasure of many poor lives, the lives that are your responsibility to protect. There's no more fitting punishment for this than death. So yes, they're killed for the sake of peace and order. The hands can kill, so cut them off, huh?" Ryuk asked. "You're trying to say we wait until they cause chaos before we kill them off?" he asked. "That's the logic, no?" "It is logical only at your mundane scale," Lord Asgard replied. "If you've seen the billions of lives that are lost simply because we wait for a chaotic being to commit a crime before we step in, you would never vouch for waiting that long. And a great example of that is you," Lord Asgard said, pointing at him. "How so?" "After I sent those 3, Seer, Finks, and Zera, to bring you in and they failed, what happened next? The 6th, 5th, and 4th calamities were destroyed along with millions of nulls. And following after, you destroyed the 2nd, 3rd, and 1st, along with further millions of nulls, and killed off all the null ancient elders who kept the peace and order in the null race. Now an entire race has fallen into extinction, simply because I sent people to bring you in instead of sending people to get rid of you. If you had followed them like I wanted, the null race would still be alive. Billions of lives would have been preserved, and ultimately, order would have reigned. Now, there is nothing but chaos." He finished, as Ryuk thought quietly, his eyes shifting here and there before they paused, and he smiled. A deep smile of realization. "Weren't you the one who started it all, though?" he asked as Lord Asgard paused. "And what exactly are you trying to say by that? You said when I was born, my anomaly light was already greater than most. Verily, you must have thought of something to either bring that light under your control or destroy it. You allowed for me to be severed into pieces, didn't you, Lord Asgard?" he asked as gasps of shock reverberated through the hall. "You were aware of the ploy, but you didn't react to it because, in a way, it gets rid of what could most likely be a ticking bomb, doesn't it?" "How dare you! Blasphemous!" the other lords immediately roared out, but then grew surprised when Ryuk turned to them in quiet confusion. "Why? Is it that surprising?" he asked, as if startled by their uproars. "You just accused Lord Asgard of such a grievous—" Lord Valkar began, but Lord Asgard raised his hand, silencing him. But Ryuk still picked it up. "So you still think an infant being sliced to pieces is a grievous crime, huh? And here I thought all of you had gone insane." He mused quietly, turning to Lord Asgard, who replied, "And why would you think that? Because to me, it's the quickest way. Let Null get rid of one of their anomalies while he's still an infant, and only an infant will die instead of billions. In essence, you're certainly giving one life away to save a potential billion, all without personally staining your own hands with blood. Who but a fool would say no to such a thing? He said, resuming his playing with the ball. But what you did not consider is the kid's chance of survival. And now what you feared came to pass. In a way, you are also one of those who destroyed the nulls. Perhaps, if you had stopped that ploy from happening, the boy would never have walked to each of the calamities, taking back what they stole from him. He would never have had to kill the millions of nulls who turned their blades to him simply because he is their lord's foe. And the ancient elders wouldn't have died trying to take revenge for what he destroyed. Ryuk spoke, and silence reigned in the void as many of the lords fell into quiet contemplation. So if you really were aware of the plot but did nothing to stop it, something I can confidently bet an arm that you did, then all of this can simply be said to be karma finding its way back to you. Don't you think so, Lord Asgard? He turned to look into those golden eyes, which stared back at him silently. That silence was enough of an answer. He indeed knew about the ploy, and he had refused to step in because, in a way, it helped get rid of one of his headaches. You're right, Lord Asgard confirmed himself. Guess I don't need to sacrifice an arm then, Ryuk mused. I am more surprised that you're not angry at that. Such a discovery, in my records of you, should have been enough to send you on a massacre spree. Is it because you cannot summon much strength, so you reign in your anger? Lord Asgard asked as Ryuk silently returned to his seat. Look at me. Do I look like I'm raining down anything? Ryuk asked, the lords furrowing their eyebrows. No, he was calm. Too calm. Almost like one who had given up on everything. You're right, though. Such a thing would have normally made me furious. But for some reason, I find it hard to muster any anger at all. I must be getting old, he muttered to himself with creased brows. One of the lords snorted. That's ridiculous. You're barely a century old. I'm curious about one thing still, Ryuk said, turning to Lord Asgard. And what is that? Your mission. It aligns too well with the mission of the three supreme races. He continued, I've heard many times now that the three supreme races, due to their power, have taken it upon themselves to maintain order in this universe. And now, here you are, the EAR, with the main goal of maintaining order. It makes me curious. Is the EAR actually the creation of the three supreme races? Silence fell. If it is, many things would make much more sense. And what do you mean by many things? Lord Asgard asked. Like Faith Vorgeth, Ryuk replied. You say it's disastrous to wait for anomalies to destroy before you kill them. But then I think of Faith Vorgeth. How many worlds has Faith Vorgeth destroyed? How many lives has he slaughtered to gain the name Null of Carnage? He probably unleashed more chaos during his time than half the entire anomalies combined, yet somehow, he still lives. Somehow, he wasn't killed for the sake of peace and order. I've heard from Null that Faith Vorgeth is like an amusing ant, a celebrity, so to speak, to the three supreme races. So it makes sense why they wouldn't want you to kill him, Ryuk explained, disbelief filling the eyes of the lords. The same is true for Null too, the absolute mastermind. He controls Faith Vorgeth like a puppet, ordering him on which worlds to destroy. Verily, that is enough for him to be marked as some SSS-level chaotic being, yet he's also kept alive. I learned he is even given god tools and artifacts from the Hallowrims, meaning he is most likely rubbing shoulders with the three supreme races. And mysteriously, he's still alive and kicking. If the EAR was founded by the three supreme races, it makes sense that you cannot kill those they favor. So, you work for them, don't you? He asked, watching the crippling silence. The lords' minds right now were swirling in disbelief. The question was, how? How could he have pieced so much together just from the simple questions he asked? It was insane. You're much smarter than I thought, Lord Asgard said, his expression very serious. The kid before him was piecing things together too fast. It was becoming alarming. Safe to say that's a yes. So what's all that grand talk of maintaining order and peace if you'll turn a blind eye based on some people's orders? Ryuk asked, as Lord Asgard replied. It doesn't erase the fact that there are still beings out there creating chaos, and we're still battling against the majority of those forces. Are you saying we should ignore all of that just because we can't deal with Faith Vorgoth and Null? Ignore billions dying because of a few we can't control? Besides, we don't owe this to anyone, do we? All those we protect don't even know we exist. Yet we secretly protect them from evils that could have destroyed them. The fact that we can't control 2 or 3 beings doesn't erase that, does it? Then why speak to me about responsibilities? You said with great power comes great responsibility. Yet now you say you don't owe this nobody? Ryuk asked as Lord Asgard paused. Those who amuse the 3 supreme races are most likely those who deal the greatest chaos, those who are feared the most. It's like the 3 supreme races are sadistic beings that live on the pain of most, and those are the people you listen to. It seems to me that you are all just ants that have managed to land on the good side of the sadistic beings and maintain your self-importance by telling yourself you're working towards a great cause. One of these golden lights can be causing chaos right now, yet it doesn't matter until it causes enough chaos for its chaos light to grow. So you don't pay attention when a man kills another man. He's only worth noticing when he kills 1,000. And there are some who don't even kill, but because they could kill 1,000, you put a blade through their neck? You're getting rid of lives based on future speculation that hasn't yet happened, all in the name of some chaos you've seen in the past? And somehow, all of this just makes sense to you? Ryuk mused quietly with such obviousness that the other lords were sent into contemplation. But Lord Asgard's expression was unchanging. You're just too young to understand. I believe it must have taken many years to delude yourself that such insanity is sanity. Seriously though, I don't really blame you guys, to be honest, Ryuk said, as Lord Asgard's eyes furrowed. You're after all doing something. Saving a couple of worlds here and there when you get the chance. Preventing more destruction with your sacrifice. A little to help more mentality. That's more than I do or have ever done. So who am I to call you bluff? I think the ones to be blamed are the 3 supreme races, who see us all as ants to be played around with. They keep things just stable enough not to cause a revolt, but also unstable enough to keep them entertained. Whoever is to be the final boss of blame must be the fool who created races with such an imbalance in power. But who knows? Ryuk mused. Maybe to him, we're all just entertainment too. Ha ha ha. At this point, he couldn't help but burst into loud, uncontrollable laughter that continued for minutes before he finally stopped. In the next moment, he rose from his seat, turning his back to them. As you can see, I'm not much interested in all this madness you're playing, Ryuk said, walking to the exit. And if the thought of causing chaos ever comes into my mind... He paused, turning his head to look at Lord Asgard. Then I'll be coming for your head first. To that, the Lord's grin widened. Until then, you all just remain the source of entertainment that you are, Ryuk said with an uncaring wave. But then he paused, staring to the side. I'll be staying in the Stellas clan for quite a while. I hope you don't mind this, Lord Stella, he added, looking at the Starlight Lady, whose brows furrowed before she shrugged. It's fine. Thank you, he said, silently walking out of the void, and the door shut with a loud thud. All that was left were the 7 EAR, lords in the void, who silently stared at each other. Ha ha ha. The first thing that broke the silence was the boisterous laughter, and all the lords turned to its source. It was Lord Asgard, whose laughter continued for about 20 seconds before he paused. My apologies. It's just that it's been such a long time speaking to one with such naivety, and he even manages to create the image of himself having won the conversation. Ah, how much he reminds me of the innocent boy I once was, Lord Asgard said, wiping tears from the corners of his eyes before turning to the others. I think it's pretty clear. His will for battle and purpose has most likely died from learning of the past truth from meeting Null and Faith Vorgoth. And yes, Faith Vorgoth has indeed been released. I got the news from the Halloween moments ago, Lord Asgard said as the other lords remained shifted quietly. But of course, Faith Vorgoth isn't our headache to deal with. And since Ryuk's will for battle has died, he had already entered his deteriorating state. From now on, his anomaly light would begin to dim rapidly, and then he'll fade off, no longer being our problem. He reminds me of those words. The brightest stars die the fastest. It's clear now that such a fate is heavenly, and none can evade it, Lord Asgard mused before turning to Stella. Since he'll be remaining in the Stellus clan, I want you to keep an eye on him and report to me every now and then about his condition. While there are no more chances of him spiraling off again, I also won't want to fall for the same mistakes twice. He seems deeply in love with a student of mine, so that should be no problem, Lord Stella said as Lord Asgard nodded. Love indeed helps kill a man's battle spirit quicker. Just make sure no harm comes to her. The universe isn't ready for a second Faith Vorgoth. I will, she replied curtly. Good. If anyone else has anything to say, let him speak his mind, Lord Azragoth said. But today, the majority of the lords chose to remain silent. The action made the lord's eyes furrow, noticing the change, but he shrugged it off. They must have all been hit by Ryuk's words. Sooner or later, they will return to their glorious castles and harems of women, and enjoyment will make them forget today ever existed. Then it's all over, he said, and in the next moment, his figure disappeared. One by one, their holograms vanished, leaving just Lord Stella alone in the Stella Prism. She remained silently staring for a long while, thoughts flashing here and there, before her 4 eyes eventually shut, reducing the void to pitch darkness.